On my previous video, I talked about balancing as it pertains to treasure class 87 uniques, ways to make those just better, since they're so rare after all. On this video, I want to talk about Runewords more so that I feel like could use some touching up. This is mostly going to be high-end Runewords that are really hard to attain, and I wanted to make them more justified. First off, I want to start with Fury. I feel like this rune word is really outdated. I feel like it was made in a time where other rune words didn't exist that were competing so hard with it. And, Jaw Goal F. Fury requiring a Jaw rune means that it's directly competing with Enigma, and it's just not compelling enough for majority of players, I would imagine. That's a little bit much for what it's giving. I feel like it needs to do more damage. Maybe even make it some type of chase item for an Act 5 Frenzy Mercenary. Give it an aura or something. There's many possible ways that you could balance it and give it a buff without breaking it. I think there's really fun ways that we could do that in the future with Diablo 2 Resurrected. And there's always going to be some people that are super purists that don't want to change anything, but I feel like if we want more content, there's going to have to be some things that are objectively strong. There's going to have to be some things that change. Now, it's just a matter of finding a happy ground where, we don't change too much to the point of negatively affecting the game. So I do know that's a very delicate balance. I feel like Wrath could be a lot better. Maybe it's better as a hardcore weapon or something like that because of the survivability, but its damage output just feels a little bit too low to justify using for most players. It is cool that it procs decrep and everything. It is cool that it's got crushing blow, which is also already weaker on a bow compared to a regular melee weapon. So I think it needs something. It needs like some flat damage maybe. Just something to give it a little bit more oomph. Something to make it more compelling to use, because after all, you do need a burr rune for it. So just like Fury, we're competing with Enigma with this rune word, and the utility that you get out of Enigma is just so much higher. What do you think about that? Pride. Now, it's really cool to get a concentration aura on your mercenary, don't get me wrong. But it's very disappointing when the mercenaries always just getting killed because they do low DPS. They don't leech a lot of life. Even if you're using like Skin of the Flayed One as your armor, I feel like Pride as the rune word itself needs some flat damage on it or something, higher increased damage. And it also needs life leech on it so that the mercenary doesn't die so easily. And so you're not pigeonholed into having life leech on the helm or life leech on your body armor or whatever, and then they still just feel like they don't do enough damage to survive the war of attrition, essentially. Eternity. This is one that I've made both eth and non-eth, and people would always ask when they saw the non-eth, why are you playing with this non-eth? And it was simply because of the revive charges. I think that this could literally be solved by simply giving eth durability repair, like repairs durability mod. That would literally solve it because it would repair the charges over time, and you could get an eth version without having to worry about it. So, it feels kind of wasteful to get a Breath of the Dying or Eternity or Oath or whatever the case, and you roll it on a non-eth because of one reason, but then you have to sacrifice the cool factor of the eth. This actually happened to me on a positive note where I made a Breath of the Dying and a Phase Blade long before you could have an Act 5 Frenzy Mercenary, and it actually panned out to be in my favor. I remember the whole internet was flaming me for making Breath of the Dying and a Phase Blade. I just wanted something that could hit fast enough to benefit from Atma's Scarab. What's your opinion on that? I personally think if a rune word's got Jaw in it, Burr in it, these really high runes, that it needs to be balanced in a way that you're very aware that it's competing with Enigma, it's competing with Infinity. That doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be as strong or as useful as Enigma or Infinity, but it does need to be more compelling to make you want to go that different route. Last Wish is another one. That was one I shared on my last video. But I truly believe Last Wish with 3 Jaw runes in it, a Burr rune, a Sur rune. Did I miss anything? You know, I think that that should have teleport on it. Because you could make 3 enigmas. You could literally make 1 enigma with the Jaw and the Burr, and then you could have 2 other enigmas lined up. So let us teleport with Last Wish and possibly even get Cannot Be Frozen. What do you think about that? I think that's reasonable. Cannot Be Frozen frees up your ring slot and a Sham in the Helm, so you could put an IAS Jewel in it to make up for the fact that Last Wish doesn't have 40 increased attack speed that Grief does. And Grief is like arguably better for PVM. Last Wish is definitely more survivable. Like the one thing that I didn't think about before I used Last Wish was how good that blinds on hit is. That's got to be amazing for hardcore players. Let me know what you think about that change though. Should Last Wish have teleport on it? I don't think that's too crazy. Silence is another one of those rune words, and maybe it's just, you know, me not seeing very much use case for it. But it could be really good on hardcore. I have used it for an assassin before because it's got the +2 to skills. It's got all that res and everything. But silence could possibly get a little bit of a buff somehow, some way. But then again, it's kind of like mid-range, mid-tier kind of rune word, so maybe it's not as important per se. Rift is one of those rune words that I feel like you don't even see anymore ever since Mosaic, but prior to that, it was only really good on the Kixen. I want to be able to make a dual Rift wielding Frenzy Barb. I want a Rift Sealer. The biggest problem with a lot of these melee weapons in general is literally the durability. Like, how are you going to berserk with an axe that has 26 durability? You know, stuff like that really needs a buff. Like, I was playing with a Doom axe before on a Holy Freeze Paladin, and it just breaks all the time with 26 durability. It's not a fun character to play because of that. You know, maybe some people just carry a bunch of orts in their inventory, but I don't personally enjoy that. I feel like Destruction's one of those ones, it's really cool in theory, but it sucks on everything except for a druid. It doesn't do enough damage to justify using it over Grief on a Zealer or a Frenzy Barb or anything like that. You could use it on like a dual Dream Paladin or something like that, and it'll still work, but at the same time you might as well just be using Grief. You know, you're just getting some cool visual effects out of it at that point that don't really do anything unless you're a druid with the synergies. So I would like to see Destruction have something cooler. Maybe a low level Holy Fire aura, maybe a low level Holy Shock aura at the same time, like 2 level 8 auras or something, just to give it some more oomph, because otherwise it's just an overpriced rune word that underperforms in my opinion. Maybe I'm tripping. Phoenix rune word as a weapon specifically, I feel like it could be good for hardcore, but I feel like in order to make it desirable for the average player on softcore, I feel like it could use some type of buffs, something to make it like more interesting, like flat fire damage maybe. That's not really overpowered because that doesn't really scale. So many enemies are immune to fire, high res to fire, whatever the case. I think that giving it something like Crushing Blow could make it more desirable. You know, even if you're just using it on like some hardcore character for the redemption aura, now that it's got Crushing Blow, it's a little bit more formidable against bosses and stuff. Something small like that could go a long way. You know, give it some increased attack speed or something. Just little things like that. It doesn't need anything insane. Wind. That's a rune word that I never really see. Wind is one of those ones that's just not very good, honestly. I think that it needs to lean harder into this whole zoomy kind of play style. I think like it could have something even like giving you the frenzy effect when you hit enemies, so you get that speed boost. Just like those monsters in Worldstone Keep and in certain areas in Act 5 have with the 2 maces, and they hit you and they build up frenzy. I think that could just be a fun play style. And it also probably needs, instead of 120 to 160 enhanced damage or whatever, it could probably do 220 to 260 and still be relatively weak. Fortitude, the weapon Fortitude. I think it could benefit from something like some crushing blow, maybe some replenish life, just to go more along with its whole theme of like being a defensive based weapon. I just want to see more Fortitude weapons in use. So I think that there could be something cool they could do. They could even have like a gamba mechanic. Whenever you're rolling a Fortitude and a weapon, it's got a 50% chance of being an F. What do you think about some Runewords possibly having something like that? Like when you roll it, it's got a 50% chance to be F with the indestructible or with the repair mod at the very least. What do you think about that? Is that outlandish? Chaos. I think this is more so a rune word that sees love in the PvP side of things. But I think it could be really cool. Let us use chaos in any kind of melee weapon, maybe except for a bow. And then you could have whirlwind builds with any class. That could be really cool to have. You know, I do know that some of the animations don't necessarily match up. If you look at my previous video where I showed the sorceress doing whirlwind, she just like casts like if she has a staff in her hand. It's kind of funny looking, but I don't think it's necessarily game breaking. Those are the rune words that come to mind the most for me when I'm thinking about ones that are underpowered or underperforming, especially relative to the runes that they require to make them. Let me know if you think I missed any or anything like that. And yeah, I hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much for stopping by. Hopefully I catch you again on the next one. Take it easy. Also, let me know if you like this style video or if you prefer the more scripted style that I did on the previous one. I'm covering the same type of topics, but this one's more of a live style of delivering my thoughts. The other one's literally completely scripted. This one just has bullet points.